Wilson Center, 31st of March 2023, cheap, poor quality electric vehicles from China. China's power play in Latin America, it's electric. Latin America is not concerned about Chinese loaned projects since it knows they might be nationalized and declared void anytime. China's most prominent power businesses have concentrated on energy transmission and generation in Latin America and the Caribbean for the past 10 years. This trend was hastened by the exit of Western rivals, including Brazil-based Odebrecht and U.S. and European firms. The most recent proof is a current, sizable deal in Peru, where the Italian corporation Enel is reducing its position. China Southern Power Grid, founded in 2002 alongside the massive State Grid Energy Company in China, aims to close that gap. According to reports, the business proposes a proposal for Peru for Enel's $3 billion energy distribution assets. That undertaking would increase China's numerous investments in power generation and distribution made in the area over the last 20 years. According to the Global Energy Finance Database, Boston University, Chinese companies and commercial banks have supported even more deal-making in this sector. Since 2000, China's development finance institutions, the China Development Bank and China Export-Import Bank, have funded nearly $10 billion in energy generation and distribution projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. For instance, Figure 1 displays a small sample of Chinese hydropower development projects in Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. For example, Figure 1 shows a small piece of Chinese hydropower development projects in Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. China's influence in power production and transmission is significantly more significant when considering alternative energy sources like wind and solar. This influence will only increase as new Chinese dams and other projects come online. Even as it reduces loans for other significant infrastructure projects, Beijing's enthusiasm for energy investments in this region is still strong. Honduras is negotiating a credit line with China for constructing the Patuca 2 hydroelectric project as part of the country's aspirations to establish a 600 megawatts hydroelectric complex after recently severing ties with Taiwan. Before this, Honduras received a $287 million loan from the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China for the Patuca 3 dam project, which will start operating in 2021. In Latin America, where insufficient energy infrastructure hurts economic competitiveness, imposes high expenses on consumers and businesses, and causes power outages in numerous locations, Chinese investments in this area are generally welcomed. However, opposition to Chinese energy projects does arise on occasion. Due to their significant market share in the energy industry, the China Three Gorges business and other connected Chinese companies have been perceived as engaging in oligopolistic behavior in Peru. When China Yangtze Power, a China Three Gorges affiliate, revealed plans to buy Luz del Sur, Peru's largest utility business in charge of supplying electricity to the region south of Lima and beyond, those worries escalated in 2020. In the agreement, China Yangtze Power would also purchase shares of Inland Energy, which worked on developing the Santa Teresa II, Lucila, and Luta power stations and the Santa Teresa I Dam. China Three Gorges also owned Peru's Chagall and San Gabon 3 dams. Peru's National Institute for the Defense of Free Competition and the Protection of Intellectual Property ultimately approved the deal, but it required Luz del Sur to purchase its electricity through open auctions until 2030 to ensure that other energy producers in the nation would have a level playing field. The unhealthy concentration of assets in the energy industry in the hands of a single foreign actor has also raised concerns in Chile. After China Southern Power Grid acquired a share in the energy transmission company Transelec in 2018, State Grid acquired the energy distributor Chilcanda Energia in 2019, and CGE in 2020, the country's national economic prosecutor, or Fiscal Nacional Económica, examined Chinese purchases. State Grid owns over 57% of Chile's regulated energy distribution due to the GCE purchase. Nevertheless, the Chinese acquisitions were finally allowed by Chilean regulators. China's involvement in Brazil's energy sector is likewise expanding, but it doesn't appear to raise any concerns about competitiveness or national security. According to researcher Pedro Henrique Batista Barbosa, Chinese corporations hold 3 or 4 power plants in Brazil in whole or in part, making up 10% of the country's total capacity for energy production. Chinese companies own over half of São Paulo's hydropower generation capacity. Additionally, around 12% of the nation's energy transmission infrastructure is owned by Chinese corporations. The Belt and Road Initiative's future is still unknown. Still, China is rethinking the scope of its global infrastructure spending in light of domestic economic challenges and the challenging lessons it has discovered when working in emerging nations. The power sector in Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly renewable energy production, electricity transmission, and related technologies and services, is a significant exception, as is evident in China's proposed new investments in Peru.